The smell of garlic hit the hallway before anyone saw the humans coming. 300 delegates from across the Galactic Commons had gathered on Palisade Ring, the largest orbital station in the Trivani system, for the 40th annual culinary symposium. It was the most respected food event in known space. Every species sent their finest chefs, their greatest food scientists, their most decorated nutrition scholars. The event lasted 5 days. It had its own broadcast channel. Billions of beings across dozens of worlds tuned in to watch species present the pride of their civilizations through the food they ate. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Commons for only 11 years. They were still considered newcomers. Most species did not take them very seriously. Earth was a small, wet, violent world on the outer edge of an unremarkable spiral arm. Its people were loud, emotional, and short-lived. But they had earned a seat at the table, so to speak, and this year they had been invited to present their cuisine for the first time. The human delegation was small. Just 2 people. Danny Okafor was a chef from Lagos who had spent 20 years cooking in restaurants across 4 continents. She was calm, patient, and moved through kitchens like water through stone. Ravi Malik was a food scientist from Delhi, thin and sharp-eyed, the kind of man who could explain the molecular structure of a chili pepper while eating one without flinching. They had arrived 2 days early, set up their station in the far corner of the exhibition hall, and begun preparing their dishes. The other delegations noticed them almost immediately, not because of how they looked, but because of how their food smelled. The Sylvani, tall beings with translucent skin and 4 delicate nostrils, were the first to complain. Their lead scholar, Professor Alathi, sent a formal request to the symposium organizers asking if the humans could be moved to a separate ventilation zone. The request was politely denied, but the message was clear. The humans were already a problem, and they had not even presented yet. When presentation day came, Danny and Ravi set their dishes on a long display table alongside offerings from 60 other worlds. The Sylvani had prepared a crystal broth that shimmered like liquid starlight. The Brellians brought compressed nutrient tiles that delivered a perfect balance of vitamins in every bite. The Palori displayed a living fungal dish that grew in real time on the plate, adjusting its flavor based on the eater's body chemistry. Each presentation received polite applause. Then it was humanity's turn. Danny placed 5 dishes on the table. A rich Nigerian pepper soup, a Korean kimchi that had been fermenting for 3 months, a block of aged French cheese, a bowl of Indian curry with visible chili flakes floating on the surface, and a small cup of black coffee, still steaming. The hall went quiet. Not the respectful kind of quiet. The kind of quiet that comes just before laughter. Professor Alathi leaned forward, her 4 nostrils flaring. She examined the curry from a safe distance, as though it might bite her. She ran a scanner over the cheese, and her device beeped 3 times in rapid warning. She looked at the coffee, then at Danny, then back at the coffee, as though she could not believe what she was seeing. "This is your civilization's contribution to galactic cuisine?" Alathi asked. Her voice carried across the hall. She did not bother to hide her amusement. Danny nodded. "It is." Alathi picked up the scanner readout and held it up for the audience. "This single dish contains capsaicin, a compound that causes pain in living tissue. This fermented product contains ethanol, a solvent used in industrial cleaning. This dark liquid contains caffeine, a psychoactive stimulant that would be classified as a controlled substance on 9 of the worlds represented here today." She paused. "And this block of aged dairy contains bacteria that are actively decomposing the food from within." The hall erupted, not in applause, in laughter. Hundreds of delegates from dozens of species laughed openly at the human table. Some recorded it on their devices. A Brellian journalist wrote a headline on the spot: "Humans eat rot and call it culture." Within minutes, it was trending on 3 galactic news networks that Ravi's hands clenched at his sides. His jaw was tight. He wanted to speak, to explain, to fight back. But Danny placed a hand on his arm and shook her head slowly. "Not now," she said quietly. They packed their dishes in silence while the laughter continued around them. Alathi published a short paper before the day was over, titled "Primitive Sensory Assault: A Review of Earth Cuisine." It called human food dangerous, unsophisticated, and evidence of a species that had not yet evolved past survival eating. The paper received 12,000 citations in its first week. Before they left the hall, Danny placed a small glass jar on the edge of the symposium table. Inside it was homemade chili oil, deep red and fragrant. She did not label it. She did not explain it. She simply set it down, looked at the nearest group of alien scholars, and said, "For anyone who is curious." Nobody touched it. Danny and Ravi walked out of the exhibition hall and did not look back. 14 days after the symposium, the document arrived without warning that IT appeared on every official channel at the same time. Every news feed, every government portal, every scientific database in the Galactic Commons. A formal advisory from the Galactic Health Directorate, stamped with the seal of all 31 member species, published in 400 languages simultaneously. The title was short and clinical. Advisory 7741. Classification of Terran Biological Consumables. Earth cuisine had been officially classified as a Level 3 bioactive hazard. Level 3 was not a small thing. Level 1 meant a substance could cause mild discomfort. Level 2 meant it could cause lasting harm with repeated exposure. Level 3 meant it was considered an active biological threat, the same classification given to nerve agents, weaponized fungal spores, and certain unstable radioactive compounds. The advisory did not use the word food anywhere in its text. It referred to human cuisine exclusively as Terran bioactive material. The reasoning was laid out in 40 pages of dense scientific language, but the summary was simple enough for any being in the galaxy to understand. Capsaicin, the compound found in chili peppers, triggered pain receptors in every tested species and caused tissue inflammation. Ethanol, produced naturally during human fermentation processes, was a solvent capable of dissolving cellular membranes. Caffeine was a psychoactive stimulant that disrupted neural signaling in 26 of the 31 member species. Allicin, the compound found in garlic and onions, was a potent antimicrobial agent that could destroy beneficial gut bacteria in nearly every known alien digestive system. Theobromine, found in chocolate, was outright lethal to 3 species in even small doses. The conclusion was unanimous. Humanity was banned from preparing, distributing, selling, or sharing any food product at any interstellar facility, diplomatic gathering, trade station, or public venue within galactic common space. Violations will be treated as biological contamination events. The galaxy reacted exactly how anyone would expect. News networks ran the story for days. A Sylvani broadcast host held up a picture of a cheeseburger and asked her audience if they could believe that a sentient species willingly consumed decomposing animal protein trapped between slabs of processed grain. A Brellian comedy program did a skit where an actor dressed as a human tried to serve hot sauce to a diplomat and was tackled by security forces. A Pal Lorre children's show featured a cartoon human character who kept accidentally poisoning friendly aliens with his lunch. It became the most watched episode of the season. On the Galactic Network feeds. The jokes wrote themselves. Humans do not cook. They conduct chemical warfare on a plate. Earth is the only planet where dinner can kill you, and they consider that a feature. If you ever feel bad about your species, remember that humans drink a bean extract that would be classified as a controlled substance on 9 worlds, and they drink it every single morning before they are even fully awake. Humanity became the punchline of the galaxy overnight. On Earth, the reaction was split. Governments issued carefully worded diplomatic statements expressing disappointment and requesting a review of the classification. Scientists published counterpapers arguing that the dosages cited in the advisory were exaggerated and taken out of context. Human rights organizations called the ban discriminatory, but the general public reacted differently. They laughed, not because it was funny, but because there was nothing else to do. Social media exploded with humans posting videos of themselves eating the hottest peppers they could find, drinking espresso shots in rapid sequence, and biting into raw garlic cloves while staring directly into the camera. One video of a woman in Mexico City eating a ghost pepper without changing her expression went viral across 3-star systems. Aliens watched in horror. Humans watched it with pride. Ravi saw the advisory on his screen at 6 in the morning, sitting in his small apartment in Delhi. He read it twice. Then he read a third time. Then he closed the screen and sat very still for a long time. He was not a man who lost his temper often, but that morning his hands were shaking that he called Danny. "Have you seen it?" he asked. "I have," she said. Her voice was calm, as always. "They compared our food to nerve agents, Danny. Chemical weapons. They put my grandmother's curry in the same category as weaponized fungal spores." "I know. How are you not angry?" There was a pause on the line. He could hear her moving around her kitchen in Lagos. He could hear the faint sound of a pot being placed on a stove. Even now, even today, she was cooking. "I am angry," Danny said slowly. "But anger does not change minds. Food does." She paused again. "They laughed at us because they do not understand what food means to humans. It is not fuel. It is not nutrition. It is how we survive. It is how we remember. It is how we love. They will learn that. Not today, but they will." "How?" Ravi asked. "Give it time," Danny said. Ravi closed his eyes. He could smell something through the phone connection. Faint, warm, familiar. She was making pepper soup. The same recipe she had brought to the symposium. The same recipe that 300 aliens had laughed at. Somewhere out on Palisade Ring, in the empty symposium hall that had already been cleaned and reset for the next event, a maintenance worker found a small glass jar sitting on the edge of the table. It was half empty. The chili oil inside had been sampled. Someone had dipped something into it, carefully and quietly, when no one was watching. The maintenance worker did not report it. He simply cleaned the jar and moved on. But someone had tasted it, and that was enough. The message arrived on Ravi's private channel at 3 in the morning, written in broken Galactic Standard with half the grammar wrong. "Please do not report this communication. I am a researcher. I tasted your chili oil. I need to understand what happened to me." Ravi stared at the screen for a full minute. Then he sat up in bed, fully awake, and read the message again. The sender had used a masked routing address, bouncing the signal through 4 relay stations to hide their origin. But Ravi was a scientist, and scientists are curious people. He replied. Her name was Ollie. She was a Sylvani, 23 years old by Galactic Standard, which made her young even by human terms. She was a graduate student at the Sylvani Central Institute of Biological Sciences, working under Professor Elathi herself. She had been in the symposium hall that day. She had laughed with everyone else. But later that evening, after the hall had emptied and the cleaning crews had not yet arrived, she had gone back. She told Ravi everything in a long, rambling message that arrived in 6 separate parts because she kept losing her nerve and stopping before starting again. She had found a jar of chili oil on the table. She had stared at it for 10 minutes. She had told herself not to touch it. She had told herself it was classified as a bioactive hazard. She had told herself that her professor would be furious. Then she had dipped one slender finger into the oil and touched it to her tongue. The first thing she felt was heat, not temperature, something else. A burning sensation that spread across her mouth and made her eyes water. Every instinct in her body told her she had been poisoned. She nearly spat it out. But then something happened that she could not explain. The burning faded slowly, and in its place came a wave of warmth that spread through her entire body. Her muscles relaxed. Her thoughts slowed. A strange, deep calm settled over her, followed by a feeling she had never experienced in her entire life. Pleasure. Pure, unexpected, overwhelming pleasure. She stood alone in the empty symposium hall for 15 minutes, eyes closed, feeling something that her species had no word for. The Sylvani diet was perfectly balanced, carefully engineered, and completely without sensation. They ate for nutrition. They had never eaten for joy. Ollie did not even know that joy from eating was possible until that moment. "What did you put in that oil?" she asked Ravi. "What did it do to me?" Ravi explained it as simply as he could. Capsaicin triggers pain receptors, yes. But in response to that pain, the brain releases endorphins, natural chemicals that create a feeling of happiness and relief. Humans had known this for thousands of years. It was why they ate spicy food even though it hurt. The pain was the door. The pleasure was what waited on the other side. Ollie was silent for a long time after that. Then she wrote, I want to study this. Properly. Scientifically. Will you help me? Robbie said yes before he had even finished reading the sentence. But Ollie was not the only 1.6 weeks after the toxicity classification. A brilliant cargo hauler named Goss was docked at a border station on the edge of common space. Goss was old for a Brellian, which meant he was tired all the time. His species suffered from a condition called drift fatigue, a slow shutdown of mental alertness that came from spending too many cycles in deep space. There was no cure. There were management drugs, but they were expensive and made his joints ache. Most Brellian haulers just accepted it and retired early. Goss was sitting in a trade bar when a human merchant sat down next to him and offered him something. A small sealed packet of brown powder. Coffee, the human said. Just add hot water. Trust me. Goss almost said no. He knew about the ban. He knew what the health directorate had said. But the human had kind eyes and Goss was so tired he could barely keep his own open. He took the packet back to his ship, heated water, and mixed it in. The first sip tasted terrible, bitter and harsh and nothing like anything he had ever consumed. But within minutes, something changed. The fog in his mind began to lift. His thoughts sharpened. His vision cleared. For the first time in 3 years, Goss felt fully awake. He sat in his pilot's seat and stared out at the stars and felt like he was seeing them for the first time that he cried. He was not ashamed of it. He just sat there and cried because he had forgotten what it felt like to be alert and alive. Goss went back to the tray bar the next day, but the human merchant was gone. So Goss did what any desperate person would do. He started asking around, quietly, carefully. Where could he find more of this substance called coffee? He was not the only one asking. Across the outer trade corridors, in stations and ports and quiet corners of the galaxy, where the health directorate's reach was thin, a black market was forming. Human food was being traded in small quantities, wrapped in unmarked packaging and passed from hand to hand like contraband. Spice packets, dried chili flakes, instant coffee, fermented sauces, chocolate bars, each one technically illegal, each one in growing demand. The health directorate began receiving strange reports from border stations. Aliens asking about Terran bioactive material at trade counters. Unexplained shipments of sealed containers marked with Earth origin codes. A Palori diplomat found with a jar of honey in her luggage at a customs checkpoint, weeping as security confiscated it because she said it was the most beautiful thing she had ever tasted. Something was happening. Something quiet. Something the galaxy's institutions were not prepared for. Ravi told Danny about Ollie. He told her about the reports. He told her about the black market. Danny listened to all of it. Then she smiled, the same small, patient smile she had worn on the day they were laughed out of the symposium hall. It is time, she said. Freeport Lena was the kind of place where nobody asked questions. That IT sat at the crossroads of 3 trade lanes, a battered old station that had changed hands so many times that no one was entirely sure who owned it anymore. It was technically neutral territory, outside the direct jurisdiction of the Galactic Commons, but close enough to benefit from its trade routes. Smugglers liked it. Merchants liked it. People who needed to disappear for a while liked it. And now, 2 humans liked it very much. Danny found a space on the station's lower deck. It had been a storage room, long abandoned, with stained walls and a ventilation system that wheezed like an old man climbing stairs. It was small and ugly and perfect. She had it cleaned in 2 days. She had a proper cooking station installed in 4. By the end of the first week, the smell of roasting spices was drifting through the lower deck corridors, and beings who had never smelled anything like it were stopping in their tracks and turning their heads. Ravi handled the science. Ollie sent him everything she had. Biological data on 14 species. Digestive maps. Toxicity thresholds. Receptor sensitivity charts. She transmitted the files in encrypted bursts from her lab at the Sylvani Central Institute. Always late at night. Always when Professor Elathi was not watching. The risk she was taking was enormous. If Elathi found out that her own student was collaborating with the humans whose food she had publicly condemned, Ollie's academic career would be finished. But Ollie did not care. She had tasted that chili oil, and something had changed inside her that she could not undo. She wanted to understand it. More than that, She wanted others to feel it too. Goss handled logistics. The old Brellian hauler had connections at every border station between Freeport, Lena, and the Outer Rim. He knew which customs officers could be reasoned with and which routes avoided health director patrols. He brought in the ingredients that Danny needed. Coffee beans from Earth, dried peppers from 3 continents, fermentation cultures, garlic, ginger, chocolate, each shipment disguised as industrial chemical samples, which was technically not even a lie. The 4 of them made an unlikely team. A Nigerian chef, an Indian scientist, a young Sylvani academic, an old Brellian cargo pilot. They had nothing in common except a shared belief that the galaxy was wrong about human food, that Danny's approach was careful and methodical. She did not simply serve Earth food to alien customers. She rebuilt it from the ground up for each species. Using Ollie's biological data, she adjusted every recipe. For the Sylvani, she reduced capsaicin to 1/10 of the level a human would enjoy, just enough to trigger a mild endorphin response without overwhelming their sensitive systems. For the Brellians, she created a coffee blend diluted with a neutral base, strong enough to clear their mental fog, but gentle enough to avoid cardiac stress. For the Paolori, she prepared honey-based desserts with the sugar content carefully calibrated to their slower metabolisms. Every dish was tested. Every ingredient was measured. Every reaction was documented. Ravi kept detailed records of every customer species, the dish they received, the dose of each active compound, and the response. It was not a restaurant. It was a research project that happened to serve meals. The first customers came because of Goss. He told a few trusted friends. Those friends told others. Within a month, beings were traveling from neighboring systems to visit the little kitchen on Freeport Lena's lower deck. They came in quietly, often after dark, glancing over their shoulders as though they were doing something shameful. They sat at the small tables Danny had set up and waited nervously. Then they ate at a Sylvani trader, tasted a mild curry, and sat frozen for 2 minutes, tears streaming down his translucent cheeks, before whispering that he had never felt anything so wonderful. A Brellian engineer drank her first cup of adapted coffee and laughed out loud, a sound so rare among her species that the other customers turned to stare. A Paolori diplomat, visiting the station under a false name, ate a small square of adjusted chocolate and closed all 6 of her eyes and did not speak for 5 minutes. These were species that had eaten for function their entire lives. Nutritional paste, balanced compounds, efficient fuel for efficient bodies. They had never known that food could make you feel, that a single bite could carry warmth, memory, comfort, and joy all at once. That eating could be an act of pleasure rather than maintenance. Humans had always known this. It was so obvious to them that they had never thought to explain it. Food was love. Food was home. Food was the thing that brought families together and kept cultures alive across centuries. Every human knew this from the first meal their mother or father ever cooked for them. But no one had ever told the galaxy. The kitchen grew, not in size, but in reputation. Word spread through whisper networks and encrypted channels and quiet conversations in tray bars. There's a place on Freeport, Lena. The humans will feed you. You have never tasted anything like it. Go. Danny cooked 16 hours a day. Ravi monitored every dish. Ollie analyzed the data and refined the formulas. Goss kept the supply lines open. For 3 months, it worked beautifully. Then Professor Alathi found out that IT was a customs report that gave them away. A routine scan of Goss's cargo at a border checkpoint flagged organic material of Terran origin. The report was filed, forwarded through channels, and eventually landed on the desk of someone at the Galactic Health Directorate who recognized what it meant. From there, it reached the Sylvani Central Institute. From there, it reached Alathi. Alathi did not hesitate. She filed a formal complaint with the Galactic Commons Authority. The charge was distribution of classified bioactive substances. The penalty, if convicted, was permanent exile from common space. The complaint named Danny Okafor and Ravi Malik by name. It named Freeport Lena as the location. And it demanded immediate action. Danny heard the news from Goss, who heard it from a contact at the border station. She was standing in her kitchen when the message came through. She read it once, set down her cooking spoon, and took a slow breath. "Well," she said quietly, "I suppose they are ready to listen now." The tribunal chamber on Palisade Ring could seat 2,000, and every seat was filled. They had come from every corner of the Galactic Commons. Diplomats and journalists, scientists and merchants, curious citizens who had traveled days just to see what would happen. The case had become the most talked about event in the galaxy. Not because of the legal details, not because of the science, because everyone, whether they admitted it or not, had an opinion about human food. And now, finally, someone was going to settle the matter. Danny and Ravi sat at the defense table. They wore simple clothes. Danny had her hands folded in her lap, calm as always. Ravi sat straight, his jaw set, a folder of research data on the table in front of him. Behind them, in the gallery, Goss sat with his thick arms crossed, his expression daring anyone to look at him the wrong way. Ollie was not visible. She had come, but she was sitting in the upper rows, hidden among the crowd, because she was still, technically, a student of the woman trying to have them imprisoned. Professor Alathi stood at the prosecution table with 3 other Sylvani legal scholars. She looked exactly as she had at the symposium. Tall, composed, certain. She had spent weeks preparing her case. She had data. She had the law. She had the weight of the entire Galactic Health Directorate behind her. The tribunal was led by a panel of 5 judges from 5 different species. The chief judge, an elderly Palori named Center, opened the proceedings with a simple question directed at both parties. What is the nature of the dispute before us? Alathi spoke first. She was precise and devastating. She presented the toxicity data again, updated with new findings from the Health Directorate. She showed chemical analyses of the dishes served at Freeport, Lena. She produced testimony from 3 medical officers who had treated aliens with mild reactions after consuming human food at the underground kitchen. She called it reckless. She called it dangerous. She called it a violation of the most basic principles of interstellar public health. The humans were told, Alathi said, her voice carrying across the silent chamber. They were told that their food was harmful. They were told that it was classified. They were told that distributing was a violation of commons law. And they did it anyway, because humans do not respect boundaries. They never have. The chamber was quiet when she finished. Her case was clean and logical and very hard to argue with. The law was on her side. The data was on her side. The judges' faces gave nothing away, but several delegates in the gallery were already shaking their heads. It seemed obvious how this would end. Then it was Danny's turn. She stood slowly. She did not bring notes. She did not bring data. She did not bring a presentation. She just stood there, a middle-aged woman from Lagos in a plain shirt, and looked at 2,000 alien faces looking back at her. "I am not a scientist," she began. "I'm not a lawyer. I'm a cook. That is all I have ever been. So I will not argue about molecules and toxicity levels. I will tell you about food." She paused and let the silence settle. On Earth, we learned to eat peppers because they kept our meat from rotting in the heat. We learned to ferment vegetables because winter was long and cold and there was nothing else to eat. We learned to drink coffee because we worked in fields from sunrise to sunset and our bodies needed help to keep going. Every single ingredient that you have classified as toxic exists in our food because our planet was trying to kill us and we refused to die. She took a breath. The chamber was absolutely still. We did not eat these things because we are reckless. We ate them because we had no choice. And somewhere along the way, something beautiful happened. We started to love them. The burn of a pepper became the warmth of a family dinner. The bitterness of coffee became the comfort of a quiet morning. The sharpness of garlic became the smell of a mother's kitchen. We turned every poison our world threw at us into something that made life worth living. She looked directly at the judges. That is what food is to humans. Not fuel, not nutrition. It is memory. It is love. It is the thing we share when words are not enough. When I cooked for the beings who came to my kitchen on Freeport, Lena, I was not distributing bioactive material. I was feeding people, the same way my mother fed me, the same way her mother fed her. The gallery was not silent anymore. There were sounds, quiet sounds, the kind of sounds beings make when something has reached them in a place they did not know they had. Then Ollie stood up. Every Sylvani in the chamber turned to look at her. Alathi's expression cracked for the first time. Ollie walked down from the gallery to the center of the chamber floor, carrying a data tablet. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. My name is Ollie. I'm a graduate student at the Sylvani Central Institute. I have spent the last 4 months studying the effects of human food compounds on 14 galactic species. She held up the tablet. In controlled doses, capsaicin produces measurable endorphin responses in 11 of those species. Caffeine improves cognitive function in 9. Fermented compounds support digestive health in 7. These are not poisons. They are medicines that no one thought to test because everyone was too busy laughing. Goss stood up next. He did not have data. He did not have research. He simply stood, a tired old Brellian with heavy eyes, and said, I could not stay awake. For 3 years, I was losing my mind to drift fatigue. Human coffee gave me my life back. That is all I have to say. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Judge Center called for order. The judges exchanged long looks. Alathi stood rigid at her table, her expression unreadable. Center announced a recess. The verdict would come later. Yes, the chamber emptied. Danny remained at her table. Ravi leaned over. Do you think it was enough? Danny watched the judges file out through a side door. Not yet, she said. But I have one more idea. Nobody expected the invitation. IT arrived on every delegate's personal device during the recess, written in simple galactic standard with no legal language and no formality. It read, You are invited to dinner. Lower Conference Hall, Level 12, Palisade Ring. Tonight at 7th bell. No speeches. No presentations. Just a meal. All species welcome. Signed, Danny Okafor. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some delegates deleted it without reading. Some forwarded it to their legal teams. Some laughed. A few Sylvani officials contacted station security to ask if this constituted a violation of the ongoing proceedings. Security said no. A dinner invitation was not a crime. Not yet, anyway. Ravi found Danny in a supply room on level 12, already unpacking crates. You cannot be serious, he said. I'm always serious about dinner, Danny replied without looking up. Danny, we are on trial. If anyone gets sick, if anyone has even a mild reaction, they will lock us up and throw the key into a black hole. Danny stopped unpacking and looked at him. Then we make sure no one gets sick. You have Ollie's data for 14 species. I have 4 months of testing from the kitchen. We know exactly what every species can handle. This is the most prepared we have ever been. She handed him a crate of spices. Now help me cook. They worked for 6 hours. Ollie joined them after 2, sneaking in through a service corridor with her data tablet and a bag of Sylvani-safe seasonings she had formulated herself. Goss arrived with fresh ingredient from his ship, grumbling about the short notice but already rolling up his sleeves. The 4 of them moved through the makeshift kitchen like they had been doing this together for years. Danny directed. Ravi measured. Ollie checked every compound against her charts. Goss hauled, lifted, and taste-tested the Brellian dishes until he was satisfied they were perfect. HFY 7th bell. The lower conference hall had been transformed. Long tables covered in simple white cloth. Small candles and glass holders, because Danny believed that every meal deserved warm light. No decorations, no banners, no screens or presentations. Just tables and chairs and the smell of food filling the room from wall to wall. The first delegates arrived cautiously. A pair of Brellian traders who had heard about the Freeport Lena kitchen but never visited. They sat down, looked at each other, and waited. Then more came. Palori diplomats. A group of young Sylvani researchers who had clearly argued among themselves about whether to attend. Journalists with recording devices they were trying to hide. Commons officials who claimed they were only there to observe. Within an hour, the hall was nearly full. Over 100 beings from a dozen species, sitting at tables together, most of them looking nervous. Danny did not give a speech. She simply began serving. For the Brellians, she had made a slow-cooked stew. Root vegetables from Earth, simmered for hours in a broth seasoned with a careful blend of garlic and herbs adjusted for Brellian digestion. The smell alone made Goss close his eyes. For the Palori, she served warm honey cakes infused with vanilla, the sugar content precisely calibrated for their metabolism. For the younger species at the table, a mild soup with ginger and lemongrass. For the Silvani, a curry. Not the blazing, full-strength curry she would make at home in Lagos. A gentle version, built on the same foundation of warmth and depth, but softened to a level that Ollie's research confirmed was safe and beneficial. Each dish was placed on the table with care. Danny served every plate herself, walking from table to table, making eye contact with each guest, saying nothing except "please eat." The Brellians ate first. They always did. The old traders tasted the stew, and one of them set down his spoon and stared at the bowl as though it had spoken to him. "What is this feeling?" he asked no one in particular. "I feel warm. Not on my body. Somewhere else." "What is this?" "Comfort," Danny said simply. "That is what comfort tastes like." The Palori delegates tried the honey cakes. One of them made a sound that her translator could not process, something between a laugh and a sigh that seemed to come from deep within her chest. She looked at Danny with all 6 eyes wide open. "We have nothing like this," she whispered. "In 10,000 years of Palori civilization, we have nothing like this." One by one, the tables fell quiet. Not the silence of the symposium, where they had laughed. Not the silence of the tribunal, where they had judged. A different silence. The silence of beings experiencing something for the first time and not having words for it. Professor Alathi arrived late. She stood in the doorway for a long time, watching. Her expression was hard to read. She had spent her career studying food as chemistry, as biology, as data points on a chart. She had never studied it as this. She had never seen 100 beings from a dozen worlds sitting together at a table, eating, and feeling something they could not name. Danny saw her. She walked to the doorway, carrying a single bowl. The curry. She held it out without a word. Alathi looked at the bowl. She looked at Danny. The entire room was watching now, though most were pretending not to. Alathi sat down. She lifted the spoon. She tasted. For a long time she said nothing. The curry was warm and layered and gentle. It moved through her in a way that no food ever had. She felt the faint whisper of heat from the capsaicin, so mild it was almost imaginary, followed by a slow wave of something that made her chest feel full and her mind feel still. She set down the spoon. She looked at Danny, and quietly, without any expression on her face, she said, "May I have more?" The room exhaled. The tribunal reconvened 3 days later. The verdict was swift. Earth Cuisine was reclassified from Level 3 bioactive hazard to regulated bioactive cultural product, legal in all common space with species-specific safety guidelines. Danny and Ravi were cleared of all charges. Ollie's research was formally published with full institutional backing. Goss received a trade license for Earth food products, the first of its kind. 2 months later, Danny opened a restaurant on Freeport, Lena. Not in a storage room this time. A real space with real tables and warm light and a kitchen big enough for her to finally cook the way she wanted. The waiting list stretched across 3-star systems. Species that had eaten paste their entire lives traveled weeks just to sit at one of her tables and feel, for the first time, what it meant to be fed by someone who cared. Above the door, she hung a small sign. It was hand-painted in simple letters, in a language that most of her customers could not read, but all of them understood. From a Death World kitchen, with love.